The past 3 days went by in a blur. It was filled with constant activity and gossip. Two of the word two fights made it to the headlines within a few hours, spreading it quite rapidly amongst the social media to the point that roughly half the state at least acknowledged it. Judging from the reports given by all the witnesses available, including the battered teens who downplayed the incident, it became clear to the police who was guilty and who was innocent. Outraged by what happened to their children, the parents of the Louds, Santiagos, and Pindries started pressing charges. The police debate on whatever the case would be heard in juvenile or regular circuits, as the guilty party aged from 13 to 15, taking into the account of injuries given that Lynn and the other elementary kids. It was decided to take the hearing place to the regular courts. Hearing was to be scheduled within the coming weeks. Monitoring their statements, the general consensus praised to those who came to defend their smaller children, more especially Lynn Loud Jr., who had slated to be bedridden for roughly a month. The Loud was immediately visited by several of her peers who applauded for her bravery. Determination and outright awesomeness, Lynn decided to try not to let it get to her head. But she couldn't help but bragging about some of her feats. It was quite commercial to see acting happy despite her current state, although they may be due to the fact that Lynn had to take strong painkillers every 6 hours. Lori and Carol received the most same treatment, as various members of their class felt their arrest was rather uncalled for and expressed their hopefulness and respective siblings were okay. Not only that, the two weren't back in their usual swing of a relationship. Bobby did talk some more with Lori than he did over the last 2 weeks. He also shared that Ronnie Ann was getting better, although she had trouble eating something without coming it back up. With Connor, he was very thankful that Carol came to his defense, although now he was very nervous on getting on his bad side. A rare moment of happiness, Cassandra actually hugged Connor. She still hadn't smiled, but told Connor she was always quite unnerved at the very moment she thought of him winding up in the hospital. The Pringy boy didn't feel as convinced since Cassie still lacked some emotion in her tone, but took it anyways. As for Lincoln, in spite of the announcement to return home, he delayed it by day to spend some time alienating Ronnie Ann. Maria gave the school a note by having them take the rest of the week off, so he could rest. There wasn't any much resting for this Loud, as he still felt guilty about not doing anything to help Ronalda. Even though he had failed to protect her as a boyfriend, Ronalda promptly gave him a slight bop to the head when he said that, telling him that she was supposed to protect him, per Lynn's orders, not the other way around. The other tomboy bragged about even getting some good licks before he even stuffed her in the trash. The Latina topped off by telling Lincoln it wasn't his fault, getting blindsided before anything else could start at least attest to that. Even more so, Ronnie Ann expressed her own worries about what could have happened to Lincoln since he was tossed down the street. While Lynn intervened before those thoughts could come past, the Ronnie Ann then felt a heavy amount of guilt after seeing her state the Jacques was in before she was taken home. She reminded herself to pay Lynn a visit once she felt like she was ready to spray stomach bile everywhere. Regardless of her condition, it didn't stop Lincoln from just being there for the tomboy. Ronnie hated to admit it, but being treated like a princess did feel nice. Ronaldo was supposed to have meant and might have had numerous rumors at times Lincoln had been forced to play butler for Lola. Unlike her tea parties, he was actually enjoying himself, and Ronnie Ann didn't make it up to him meaningless tasks. A day later, it was time for Lincoln to finally leave the house. Even though Ronnie Ann did try to take it stride, Lincoln and Bobby caught a few tears leaving their eyes. Lincoln promised that he'd call her every day, to which the Santiago girl grimaced slightly and told him to do it every 2 days at least. The last thing everyone wanted was them to wind up like Lori and Bobby and write up on phone bills. She also had to have the urge to leave a nice heart-shaped mark on his lips. Leaving the taste bile in her mouth was just horrible, so hugged tight suffocated. It all took was 6 minutes worth of riding the shotgun before Lincoln could see that familiar old house with toys scattered on the lawn and the roof. The boy then breathed a content sigh. "Thanks for the ride, Mr. Santiago." "Any time, Lincoln. Besides, not like I have to go in early today." Marcus chuckled. The two sat in silence for a moment. Since it was a short trip, Lincoln didn't have much on his mind besides spending the time with his real family and feeling at home again for the first time in weeks. "Hey," Lincoln twisted his head back to Marcus. The older man twisted the wheel as he turned down the street. "I know you probably don't need to be told this, but make sure you take care of Arnoldo, okay?" Lincoln grew more confident by this, but Mr. Santiago wasn't finished. "I know she's at the age where she's trying to handle things herself more, but I know under all that hard skin Ronaldo claims to have, she's a bit of a shy girl. I watched come into this world. The first time she got into a fight in school, everything about her changed. My little girl went from being quiet and timid to being boastful and loud. A bit too much if you ask me. She's used to being the one causing trouble or go out looking for it. But in reality, she's just building up the wall to hide her real feelings. Saying it made her look weak." Marcus shook his head. "But I told her that before things would go the way they led to problems later on. And now it's obvious that she has a difficult time expressing herself." Lincoln couldn't deny him there. How Ronnie Ann continued to prank him, despite the two being close friends after that date at the French-Mexican restaurant. Now they were both on the subject. Lincoln started to think that she could probably just stayed distant from him at school until they would have a chat later. It would have given much less stressful, inhuman, embarrassed in front of the peers frequently. However, there was one tidbit Ronnie Ann told him not long ago. It was a day after Lincoln gained his new reputation. Pretty awkward now with how Lincoln was probably near the bottom of the popularity chart, if there was even one. Just a few days ago now, and he was close to the top. The Loud asked her why their classmates were acting like he wasn't the new school bully when he was the same old nerd who just loved Ace Savvy and playing video games. The question popped up after Ronnie Ann clicked on the random video of a school brawl going on, with many of her students watching or cheering. "Well, Amo, the real reason is because everyone wanted to act like they've got something to hold over everyone else. Or they just like to pick others at times to make themselves feel better. Some may say, liking or having this makes you cool. If you like this thing, it makes you a nerd. If there's something I've learned, people in our class can be like sharks and everyone else is stupid fish. Someone goes after a guy or girl, picks on them for no reason, then a little laugh. And others will do the same because they think it's cool or funny. They also do it so they don't get treated like fresh meat." Lincoln recalled how Ronnie Ann developed a small frown almost immediately after. Sharks aren't usually picky about who they target. The tomboy then gave a smirk. "But when the fish finally targeted finally fights back, the shark doesn't look so big, does he? In your case, Lincoln, I think it's due to you being a nerd for so long when you kicked Chandler's butt. Anyone who had picked on you thought they'd be next." Ronnie Ann felt a twinge of regret run through her for a moment. Or feel like a big jerk. She said that last part quietly, but it didn't go unnoticed. Lincoln could have said something about it, but Ronnie Ann pulled up another cop video. They shared another laugh before Lincoln got a text from Luna that they were about to go out for lunch. Lincoln certainly didn't expect an analysis to come like that from Ronnie Ann of all people, but it has clearly accurate. He also didn't realize how deep her words were until the actual date. She had went through the same thing since then. The Loud assumed Ronaldo had to keep up the impression of a bully to ensure no one picked on her like in 4th grade, hence why the wall Marcus had mentioned. Guess she had been doing it for so long she forgot how to talk to someone she wanted to be friends with. Lincoln fought a little glummy, but she did change though. Ronnie Ann doesn't seem to think much of it about what everyone else thinks now. I mean, I guess she did it first due to what you just said, but what made her change? Mr. Santiago pulled down the visor above Lincoln's seat. Look in the mirror, Lincoln, and you'll find the answer. The boy looked up in his own reflection. His eyes widened slightly as the faint finally sunk in. I don't know how you managed to do it, son, but keep doing what you're doing. She could use someone like you to keep her head on straight. The loud blush a little. Thanks. Lincoln looked down at the dashboard. How much longer do we have until we get to my house? We're already here. The 11-year-old raised eyebrows and looked out the window. The home looked the same as it always did. Toys strewn everywhere, a family heirloom van sitting on what could count as a driveway, chip paint as the roof tiles hanging here and there. It made Lincoln feel warm all over. I know it's been a few weeks, but man, I missed this place. Good luck, Lincoln, and stay safe, Marcus added as the boy got out. As Lincoln started to take his stuff out the back seat. Oh, and if you need someone to law down the law with your folks, just give me a shout. The man gave a wide grin. Lincoln chuckled nervously. Thanks, but I don't think that'll be necessary. He shut the door and stayed around for a brief moment until Mr. Santiago turned a corner. Looking back at the house. Welp, here goes nothing, Lincoln muttered as he walked up the beaten path. When he got to near the front door, Lincoln twisted the knob out of habit, a little bit surprised to find it unlocked. Raising an eyebrow, Lincoln opened the door to find the living room and, of course, the dining room eerily darkened. Hello? The boy called out into the abyss. A light from the outside was making it hard to see anything, so Lincoln dragged his hand along the wall until he found the light switch. Upon flipping it, surprise! Was what was greeted the boy. Lincoln yelped, staggering back in a knee-jerk reaction, until he found himself lying on top of his backpack. He tried to get up to see who was there, beginning to regret packing so much stuff into that bag. A hand once grabbed his and pulled him up. Sorry about that, sport, Lynn Sr. chuckled, fidgety. Once he could see forward, Lincoln saw the rest of his family were there, along with Papa, and to the boy's surprise, Mr. Grouse. The living room was decorated with party favors, including a sign that said "Welcome Back," strung up onto the ceiling. Snacks were on the folding table next to the couch, in particular nothing that one of the plates had some favorite his party treats on it. There was also a large chocolate cake, sitting nestled in a glass container that was padlocked for reasons Lincoln could only guess. So what's this party for? Lincoln asked as his dad helped him to his feet. Stupid question, he knew, but he didn't hurt to ask. Since you were coming back today, we thought it'd be best to give you a warm welcome, Rita spoke, with her tone matching her enthusiasm, bringing her son to a bear hug. We're also sorry for driving you away, sweetie. Lincoln chuckled a little. I already forgave you back at the park and everyone else over the past week. His voice was muffled due to being pushed into his mom's stomach. He pushed away for a bit so he could breathe. But you didn't have to do all this. Yeah, we could have, but we would have been party poopers if we didn't, Luann piped up, laughing at her own jokes. Most of the girls groaned, although Lynn Sr. and Lincoln stifled a laugh. We got your favorite party snacks, some of your favorite comics, and a cake. Lenny spoke as she pointed out what was on the table. Oh, and I think Lori got you this totes cute shirt. Did she mention cake? Lola asked. She did. Lori looked down at the princess. Why do you think I bolted shut? Oh, come on. Are you sure we can't have one teeny-weeny slice? Lana begged. No. The teen held firm, folding her arms. I didn't get it just so you two could pig out. No one is coming first until Lincoln does, and I'm not going to remind you again. I had suggested that we wait till the weekend to perform this party, considering that it was still a school day, Lisa quiped. Lana gave a sideways glance at the little genius. Oh, hush, party pooper. You wanted this to happen just as much as we did. As everyone else chatted amongst themselves, Lincoln looked around another again. All the sisters were pretty excited, a few starting an argument over the cake. Lily was playing around with Cliff for baby keys, and Lucy was dangling over them. A rare sight of herself, since Lucy was also giving a small smile. The boy also grew a bit confused when he glanced over at Pop chatting with Mr. Grouse. He was aware that Pop knew what happened, but Mr. Grouse? Now that he thought about it, the door was wide open when he saw his hate-giving speech. Shaking his head, Lincoln shoved that memory at the back of his mind, since especially the festivals were starting. He didn't want to let the past ruin the moment. Still, he felt bad for Lynn that she had to skip out on doing much of anything for several weeks, and given the state of the mouth, Lincoln wasn't so sure she'd be able to enjoy the treats as he was seeing. I'll save her a big piece of cake after everyone gets their share. She really earned it. Lincoln spoke awkwardly, getting out of his mom's grasp chat with his sisters. A few hours had passed before the party started to wind down. Lincoln was lying on the new crafting bed in his room. He admittedly did that this was way better than the previous one. It may have been due to sleep on the couch for so long, but the mattress was so soft, and it got to the point where he nearly as soon as his head touched the fabric. The bed itself was slightly wider than expected, but stronger overall, to which the middle child thanked Lenny greatly, and his dresser and desk looked like it came straight out of a factory. It was funny to think that this was the very room that used to be stripped bare to the point where it more looked like a closet than the bedroom, as it was intended to be. Gazing up at his wardrobe, Lincoln noted the amount of Ace Savvy-themed shirts hanging on the rack alongside his usual orange polos. Laurie went all out, huh? The boy then spoke to himself, breathing in deep. Lincoln let out a sigh of relief as he continued to lie in the dormant that he was in his own. A knock on the door interrupted, though, not that he minded. Swinging his feet out, Lincoln stood and tried to open the door, only to grow momentarily confused when it wouldn't budge. The boy groaned, slapping his forehead on the stupidity. Oh, that's right, the lock. Another feature of his room with the door that it finally had a new locking mechanism. Lola was the first to claim it, as she was the one who got it for him. Lana installed it, though. The old one had been broken for so long due to the girls constantly barging into his room that it was nearly alien for Lincoln to have an unlocked door himself. During that time, he grew to accept the girls would trample his privacy without warning, but he'd just keep it unlocked. At least, he was ignoring them again. Now it seemed that Laurie would spread the word about his privacy concerns, and the girls promised to knock whenever they needed him. Twisting the tumbler in the knob, Lincoln opened the door to see the smartest person in the house staring up at him. "Greetings, elder brother. How are you doing so far?" Lincoln shrugged. "Doing okay. You need help with something?" Lisa shook her head. "Negative. I had come to ask for assistance on planning of your prank." "Prank?" Lincoln asked. The sudden art of realization smacked him in the face nearly 2 seconds later. It nearly slipped in his mind with all the positive vibes going around lately. However, Lynn's absence was a grim reminder of what caused all this to happen. "All right! Nearly forgot," he chuckled deeply, nervously. "But yeah, I'm gonna need a lot of help since..." Lincoln rubbed the back of his head. "Every time I plan something, it goes haywire. Probably because you forgot to minute the details on how it would have been paying your attention to," Lisa replied, waving her hand in motion for Lincoln to follow. As they walked into the little genius room, Lincoln noted that the room didn't look very much different from when he left, aside from the large monitors on the desk and attached to the walls, as if he was stepping into a security room. "Hey, Lise, mind if I ask you something?" "Ask away." The toddler jumped into her chair. "What exactly were you doing for the past few weeks? I've met with just about everyone else in the family besides you and Lily since I was gone. Yet I haven't heard from you at all. It wasn't like you could have at least sent me a text or email or..." "I realize that myself, and I do apologize. I have been rather busy with the university as of late, and along with doing business with some of the fellow scientists over important matters, I simply did not manage my time properly to make contact with you." Lisa wheeled over the stack of papers before handing them to Lincoln. "I did have the time to complete a list of favors that I owe you, of the various experiments that you've assisted me with." Lincoln raised an eyebrow before reading through the sheets. Some of the experience and accidents listed were still fresh in his mind, but the others were real head scratchers. According to that last stated, Lisa owed him roughly 150 favors. Lincoln smiled nervously. "Thanks, Lisa, but you don't have to all do this." "Perhaps not." Lisa paused as her voice faltered a little, wheeling over to him. Her eyes held a downcast look. "I still regret not helping you when you really needed someone with some logic into all this." The 4-year-old looked at the floor as she continued with her thoughts. Not a day went by that I still kept thinking to myself, if I had helped you before you reached to the point where you snapped, none of this would have happened. Her whole body flinched as a light chill went up her spine. I still can't believe I called this whole farce of interesting case study. You still had your scientists on the brain, so I guess that's how you help think though, even though it's annoying sometimes. Lincoln gave a frown of his own, but there's no telling what could have happened. You were the first person to realize that the luck was fake, what if... He then gave a short pause as a horrid thought came up. What if they tried to kick you out like they did to me? I mean, I was very mad at night, but I might have lost it completely. If I heard they would try to kick you out too because of bad luck, Lincoln quoted his fingers. He no longer had a difficult time in saying those two words, but it still felt like a bet left a bad taste in his mouth. Lisa hummed questioningly. Victim of circumstances is a real possibility, and if that were the case, I would truly say that our families won't be worth saving. I am pretty certain you have felt the same way after you debate on whether you should contact the local authorities. The boy gave a low nod. I didn't think this was all worth seeing everyone was getting put into an orphanage or mom and dad going to jail. But that still stands a sign of what could happen when one reaches to their breaking point. Lisa turned back around the chair, starting the process of booting her system. It's quite sad and a bit appalling that all of us had to experience these tense 17 days to realize how embolic we were all being, especially for myself, for falling for that trick in the first place. Lincoln walked up behind the chair, resting his hand on Lisa's head. I was surprised too. You're still pretty little, Liz. Especially besides, the boy smiled. I forgave just about everyone back at the hospital. Lisa's cheeks heated up slightly as she bit her lip. It's truly a mystery of how you could be so forgiving, dear brother, especially after everything that's happened to you. Even more so to everyone who's greatly wronged you, however hasn't contacted you in the past 408 hours. Lincoln gave a shrug. That's just how I am, I guess. I thought I would be mad at you guys forever, but it didn't last. Like you said earlier this month, you tried and you couldn't get to them, so you gave up. Just because we haven't talked, that doesn't mean I should hold it against you. Lisa stared down at her keyboard. Ugh! Lisa yelped as she was suddenly lifted out of the chair, and then her brother hugging her from behind. I still love you, Lisa, and I'm actually glad you needed a hug. Lincoln chuckled. Lisa held her surprised gaze from a few more moments, before resting her hands against her brother's arms. She had returned the hug as best she could, smiling contentedly. I love you too, Lincoln. Got room for one more? A teenage voice slightly cut in. Lincoln turned around to see his comedian sister leaning against the doorframe. Oh, hey, Luann. He lowered his younger sister's back into the chair. What's up? Just thought the expert ought to help you with the planning, Luann replied as she walked in. So, she leaned on the desk. Think of anything yet? Lincoln shook his head. I'm still trying to find out how this is going to work. But in order to do that, I need to figure out where Chandler usually goes during school. Lincoln hummed as he tapped his chin. Or this prank could happen right before school. That way everyone could see it. That does sound like a reasonable. If he's aware that he's wanted man, Chandler may attempt to use the crowd of students over as cover. Lisa then cackled her fingers together before using some sort of algorithm to the command console. However, I can access the school's security system to pinpoint where he enters on campus on a daily basis. Okay, but is there a way to get him while he's still in the crowd? Lincoln voiced uneasily. I don't want to accidentally hit someone else with this idea. Oh, not to worry, Link, Luann piped up, ruffling the preteen's hair. If I could set up a trap, then you can get off to set up multiple pranks at a time. I could definitely get my accuracy down to make him the star of the show. Besides, earlier this year, if I had to deal with a few girls heckling me about my appearance. A smug grin was very evident on the comedian. Guess who got the last laugh at the end? Wait, didn't you come home nearly in tears a few times? Lincoln pointed out. Luann's faltered a little. Yeah, she drew out, avoiding the stares from her two siblings. But one important lesson about heckling someone is that you gotta be prepared that they get served back so you can dish out. Guess you could say Chef Luann gave them the main course. She managed to laugh herself. Lincoln rubbed his chin. He tried to recall some of the pranks that Luann had done on the family during April Fools, although subconsciously they kept getting pushed back to his mind due to how distasteful pranks they had been. Do you still have any videos of how you set up your pranks on Christmas? Luann started. The memory of how she dealt with the tapes came fresh to her mind. She took all of Lincoln's embarrassing moments and may or may not have included some of their prank videos, dumped them into a pile used for one of Lynn's bats to smash them into pieces. Then she used the film to burn all the grill. Lynn Sr. almost called the fire department when the backyard was starting to lit up. The comedian rubbed some of her eyebrows instinctively, feeling the marker imprints as well as the uncomfortable lack of hair. I got rid of the tapes since I'm trying to scale back, but I do remember how I set up one of my pranks. I can make some changes if needed. Well, I can at least have the rest of the week off, so we have plenty of time to figure all this out. Lincoln looked back at the monitors, which were now showed various locations of the school throughout the hacked security cameras. Lincoln smiled a little after noticing the certain look-alike visible in the hallway. Might even get a new friend to help. It took a few days' worth of careful planning, timing, and moving some equipment around, but it would all be worth it soon. Once identifying Chandler on the security feed, Lisa plotted his course throughout the day and took note of all the time frames where it would be best to spring their trap. The rotten redhead was within a few first group of students to reach the school, standing amongst the front so he'd be able to get inside as quick as possible and disappear within the crowds. If they didn't pull the prank on him there, Lisa would figure that they would shoot for recess. To her dismay, Chandler hadn't gone outside over the past few days, preferably to stick to the library. Lincoln frowned when he saw this, figuring Chandler must have had realized that being out in the open would make him an easy target. Plus, the library was a bit of a sanctuary within the school. Causing any trouble there would land anyone in detention. So, the white-haired child decided they would make it look like they just have to get everything ready before school started. Keeping this in mind, Lincoln and Luann spent their next 2 days planning their trap. They weren't the only ones aiding to the scheme, however. In spite of the hesitant to do so, Lincoln asked Lori for Carol's number and invited Connor to his house. Unlike Lincoln, Connor only sustained a few injuries during the brawl, so he was clear to go back to school a day later. While Lincoln was still a little sore from the revelation of Connor playing a part, causing a bit of a turbulence in the Louds' relationship. The Pringy boy was unaware that Chandler had been taking photos of him the whole time. Plus, Lincoln knew he'd feel a little guilty later on if he didn't let Connor aid in a revenge scheme. The blonde also, too, gave some helpful tips about Chandler's demeanor. The redhead looked to be on the average of crapping himself, knowing his plan had failed. The teen's hired, but hadn't dropped his mind of name, which suited the kids just as fine as they felt his personal matter they wanted to deal with. Ronnie Ann video chatted just to give her own advice, seeing that she was stuck at home due to her sickness. Maria said that she would just be fine by the middle of the week, but the tomboy was still dreading the moment of work she would have to do to catch up. They all ran into a little snag when the kids realized they were missing the important piece of their puzzle. And Connor had whistled the help of the oldest sister, just because she knew a friend. And with all that planning, it brings us to Friday morning, just an hour before school start. Lori drove up to the school before she took the higher grade Louds to the campus. The plan was almost put on hold as some teachers were already present, especially Principal Huggins. To combat this problem, Lola and Lana opted to keep Huggins distracted by playing 20 questions. Lucy was to scare off any teachers who were approaching Luann, Lincoln, and Connor. The trio had set up their part of the prank just outside the front doors, while Lisa did her part at home, gave the security cams a false view, and hacked automated sprinklers, just mainly operated by the genius herself. Outside, Cassandra and Maggie were on the roof on the main grounds, respectively setting their parts for the trap. The group finished their work, just as a few buses were arriving. Lincoln and Connor hid behind the adjacent hallway, idly watching the front doors. Luann sat up on the opposite side, with her face somewhat illuminated by her phone. "Are you sure it's going to work, Lincoln?" Connor whispered. The Loud gave Ave a low shrug. I spent 3 days making sure it would. Plus, you're the one who suggested the boot instead of a boxing glove. I just hope this leaves a huge mark on his face, the other boy muttered. That will teach those snot jerks a thing or two. Oh, Lincoln chuckled, almost darkly. We're just getting started. After all that's happened, Lisa put it, we're going to teach a harsh lesson about what happens when you mess with the wrong intellectuals, he said, as the last word imitation of Lisa's lips, which considered Connor a stifled laugh. The two boys ducked out of sight when they saw one of the school's security guards approaching. The guard didn't notice them, nor saw Luann, who managed to barely avoid being spotted. The trio watched carefully, hoping the guard didn't notice their little contraption was hoisted to the ceiling. The guard brought out his keys, ready to notice the lock was turned. Huh? He scratched his head. I thought it was locked earlier. With a shrug, he stuttered back down, the kids breathing a sigh of relief. Connor unclipped the walkie-talkie from his pants. Lisa, do you see a target jerk? They nearly heard nothing before the 4-year-old's voice cut in. Confirmed. He's in the middle of the large group, approximately 40 students. He'll be within at least the door momentarily. Perfect, Lincoln grinned, giving the thumbs up to Luann. The comedian nodded, biting her lip with excitement as she watched her screen carefully. On the screen showed a view of 2 cameras. One was angled next to the door, while the other was looking straight at the floor. Soon enough, the door opened and the first few students walked in. An air of calmness surrounded them, as they knew the pains of the school would be over within 6 hours. Lincoln and Connor acted like they were just chilling against the wall, while Luann relaxed her posture. 10 seconds has put the comedian watched as the students walking in. Before the first camera centered to one particular student as he came through the doorway. Chandler looked like he was calm, but anything was about that. He considered it being a blessing that Lincoln was taking a few days off from school, knowing next time he met the Loud, it would be best that he gets his will written out. The redhead was all aware of Lincoln's sister severely hurt in the incident, and was referring to Lincoln told them right after he gave his face a makeover. The boy knew that certain death was coming to him. The last few days were spent with Chandler, just waiting from that one call for the police about his own improvement of the fights, of how he bribed teams to beat up a couple kids just for petty revenge. To his surprise, even the local news covered the incident, and none of his parents had been asked by anything but the police. Not only that, it seemed like Connor didn't spoke a word about it since his visible injuries. Still, he had to keep his eye on the shoulder at all times. Not only that he didn't have a choice, but his other friends effectively left him just to take the punishment after they put 2 and 2 together. Not wanting to get caught up in the surge, that would be Lincoln's rage. It was times like this where he felt relieved to be packed in a group of students. Blending in with the crowd usually ensured survival for single persons wishing to hide, and these were certainly the circumstances that had called for it. Unfortunately for Chandler, all the times he had hit running away from troubles didn't save him at the end, nor considered on how resourceful Lincoln could be. Right when she felt within rage, Luann tapped the red button on the screen. A small box attached to the pole released its hoist, swinging down towards the unsuspecting redhead. When Chandler noticed the incoming object, he was struck like a deer in headlights. His brain kicked back at the gear at the last second, giving the boy enough time to brace himself. He flinched when he heard a popping sound, but surprisingly, he didn't feel any pain. Opening his eyes, he saw the box that stopped within a few feet from his face. Chandler then took a moment to look what it was attached to. Before looking back at it, raising a brow, he started to wonder why he shielded himself in the first place. The box was made out of cardboard. At this point, the other students were staring at what they believed was a failed prank. Chandler was about to leave when he noticed a small note taped to the opening. "We know what you did," Change read to himself. Just above the lines, the redhead could see what appeared to be camera lens. Around the corner, Luann was staring back at the bewildered 5th grade's face for her phone. "Here comes the punchline, or should I say kick?" She chuckled to herself as she pressed the button for the second time. Before he could even figure it out, Chandler told himself and found himself flying through the front doors with the spring-loaded boot shot out of the box. bashed him in the face. The redhead grunted in pain before he tumbled to the ground for a few seconds, drawing the attention of the next batch of arriving students, landing on his back. Chandler pushed himself up midway, revealing as a black boot print covering the center of his face. Several students started to chuckle at this sight, and this included Lucy and the twins, who stood near the doors to which to show. Attempting to ignore them, Chandler grumbled as he started to stand up, only to find himself doused in water from the school's sprinklers. The boy sputtered and flailed as the water soaked him to the bone, gaining a few more laughs from the scattered students. A few feet away from the sidewalk, Cassie peeked out from the bush, giving a low smile as she flipped on the switch and a fan sitting from behind a pile of hay. A powerful wind blew the weed directly towards Chandler, sticking to him like glue. Once he was completely covered, the water fan stopped, and with the shocked redhead looking where the horse had came from food from. On top of that, why did it smell? It was only a few laughing jokes before the entire front of the school was howling with laughter now. Nearly half of the witnesses pulled out their photos to snap pictures, with others posted making jokes at the redhead's expense. Chandler formed a scowl on his wheat-covered face, debating on what was worse, being covered in sticky hay or the humiliation. Sadly, it wasn't over yet. Cassandra looked to the roof, giving a curt nod to Maggie. The teen then nodded back, before pulling the rope to the held. Behind her, a large murder of crows cawed loudly as they flew from their coop. They gathered about 20 feet in the air, scattering about before picking up the familiar scent of birdseed. Maggie giving a light chortle as she watched the birds they drive down, showing no fear towards the object meant and to ward them off. Hearing loud cawing, the students looked up and saw the massive group of birds diving towards them. Those were the closest that Chandler could scatter, using whatever held as shields for their heads. As for the fox scarecrow, he gave a swift yelp and started taking off down the sidewalk. The flock followed with haste, drawing any nearer by the second. Near the entrance, Lola was on the ground holding her midsection. "Oh man, my ribs!" she spoke in between fits of laughter. Think we could have covered him in dog meat?" Lana asked, gesturing to Lucy. "That would be nice, but crows are enough. I've seen things that what can do in a group," the post said momentarily. Pulling out a walkie-talkie, Lucy then pulled the receiver, frowning a bit as she shook the device to get rid of static. "Lincoln, turn down your street." I guess Lisa was just about right about it too. Lincoln's voice answered back. "Have I ever been wrong before?" Lucy opened her mouth, but Lisa quickly added, "On second thought, don't answer that." "Right? But I always turn left." Luann chuckled over the line. "I guess that means the final part of the prank is playing now." As Chandler was running frantically down the street, there was someone lying behind a tree just up ahead. Ronnie Ann gave a heavy sigh to herself, as her stuffed nose made it harder and rather uncomfortable to breathe normally. A cough escaped her, the 11-year-old cringing a bit as she felt the familiar of something building up in her throat. The tomboy looked with a deep breath before hacking out some mucus, letting out a few coughs to clear her throat. The sounds of panicked screams reached her ears, making the 11-year-old grin with anticipation. "Ugh, Mom's gonna kill me later, but this will be worth it," Ronnie Ann uttered. Her voice sounded nasally due to her cold. She pressed herself and flesh against the tree, daring to peek around the base. Chandler was just approaching fast, and she only had one chance to nail this right. Reeling to her back foot, Renolda waited until she was certain that he was just a few feet from her hiding spot. Just as the redhead was about to pass, the tomboy brought her foot forward and swung out with a wide kick. Feeling the shoe meeting the soft matte flesh, along with the high-pitched male shrieks, was music to her ears. Chandler crumpled to the ground as he held his package, hissing in pain while Ronnie Ann grinned down at him. "That was for Lynn, and this is." She pressed her foot onto the boy's poorly unprotected groin. "It's for the fake pictures." Ronnie Ann growled as she grinded her foot into him. The tomboy promptly slopped his midsection twice, forcing the air out of his lungs. Seeing the birds approaching, Ronnie Ann gave another stomp on the groin for good measure. "I'd do worse, but your friends are here." The tomboy backed up, as the birds swarmed Chandler like sharks discarded meat. The redhead could only scream as the birds pecked at him every few angles. Thrashing around on the ground was a faint attempt to shoo them away. Ronnie Ann brought out her phone and snapped a few photos, giving even a few chortles at the scene before her. Feeling that her nose was starting to run again, the tomboy wiped it with her sleeve, sniffled hard before walking back to her house. Chandler continued to scream as loud as possible until Ronnie Ann was out of hearing range.